Welcome, friends, enemies, kind mothers, to wake up on Saturday mornings to think clearly. Wake Up and Think Clearly is available on YouTube in the channel Wake Up and Think Clearly with the letter N for and. Wake up and think clearly. So I'm waiting for folks to join me. I better call some people up. Yes. Luis Del Pino. Let's get ready to rumble. Wake up and think clearly. Let's see. Dominique. Oh, there it is. Wake up. Let's go to Facebook and see if we can get what's his name? Yeah. Justin. Justin Williams. Really? Let's see. So, how was your weekend? No, how was your week? Well, I could bring up books. Yes. get some books to show and tell. This thing doesn't work. No. Let's see. Show and tell. Some books to show. Programming the human biocomputer. Oh. Oh. This book, Programming the Human Computer. What's it about? Well, you can treat the human mind, or is it the human brain plus nervous system, as a biocomputer. So our whole body is the biocomputer, not just the brain. So what can we do with that knowledge? The thinking machine. Pavlovian programming. The basic principles of classical programming were first discovered in Pavlov's experiments with dogs. The figure shows how this form of programming works. At step 1 below, Pavlov presents meat, the unprogrammed stimulus, to a hungry dog. It is called unprogrammed because salivating at the smell of meat is a built-in reflex stimulus response association. When a dog smells the meat, it responds with the unprogrammed response of salivation. This stimulus response association is part of the basic operating system of the dog's biocomputer. It can act as a basis for programming and metaprogramming. So step 1, the UPS is meat, is the stimulus. It produces a UPR, a response, salivation. Step 2 is PS, the bell, plus the UPS, the meat, goes on to produce, again, salivation. Step 3, PS, the bell, produces PR, programmed salivation, program response. So Pavlov demonstrated the programmability of the built-in salivation response when he rang a bell at the same time that he presented the meat to the dog. This is called pairing because the sound of the bell ringing was paired with the presentation of the meat. Again, the dog responded by salivating. Pavlov paired the sound of a ringing bell with the meat several times. Next, Pavlov rang the bell but did not present the meat, and the dog salivated anyway. The dog had been programmed to salivate at the sound of a bell. The bell is the programmed or learned stimulus, and the salivation is the programmed or learned response, as shown in step 3. The association is called programming because dogs don't normally salivate at the sound of a bell. Okay, now we understand what Pavlov demonstrated. So what's the next step in our understanding? So does that mean that everything we do is a programmed response, except the basic things like when we see some food or smell some food, we salivate, or we choose to salivate, or when we see a beautiful woman for a man to see. When we as men see a beautiful woman, what is our unprogrammed response? So that's that's a introduction to the book, Programming the Human Biocomputer. It's by John C. Lilly, MD. It was published in 2004. This edition is to difference. John Cunningham Lilly, MD. Translated by Beverly A. Potter, PhD. Why was it translated? There's an interesting story about the author. This author, Lily's book emerged from years of rigorous, intensive, even ruthless investigations of his mind, confined in experiential conditions that went beyond even the walled-in testing cave of a Tibetan master or the deep labyrinthine caves of the ancient shaman, namely the flotation tank, which eliminates input from other humans and from outer sense impressions. Oh. Welcome, friend. Welcome, Dom.
Morning, Jay.
D-O-M. D as in destruction. O as in of, and M as in man, destruction of man.
Yeah, I like that one.
Mankind. If we can destroy mankind, then will animals flourish better.
Good.
I was just showing our friends programming the human biocomputer by John C. Lilly, MD. He passed away, but this work has a curious history. It was conceived from a space rarer these days than it was in those days, and written as a final report to the government agency. The book, the work, and its notes are dated from 1964 to 1966, but the conception was formed in 1949. Well, that was that book. And look at here, another wonderful book. Oh, it's upside down. It's afflictive emotions, emociones destructivas. Oh, destructive emotions. That's in Spanish. A conversation with the Dalai Lama and Daniel Goleman, who wrote The Emotional Intelligence. Oh, you might enjoy this book. Empires of the Word. Oh, word, not of the world, of the word. A language history of the world. Where did Sanskrit come from? Sanskrit.
Suppose it was passed down by the
healing
gods.
Language.
Yeah.
Sanskrit has a far-flung history and has been in contact with cultures and conducted in other languages all over Southern, Eastern, and Central Asia. An interesting generalization emerges. Nowhere has this linguistic contact led to loss or replacement of the other linguistic traditions, even though Sanskrit has always been central to new cultural developments wherever it has reached. This record makes a striking contrast with the impact, too often devastating, of languages of large-scale campaigning civilizations such as Greek, Latin, Arabic, Spanish, French, and English.
Does that actually say that in there, Jay?
That means that when English or Spanish come to a culture, that it wipes out that culture.
Yes, sir.
But Sanskrit, when it goes to different lands, it doesn't try to overwhelm the culture. It doesn't destroy the culture. It is used only for healing. Yes.
Well, if you follow, if I can share it for a couple minutes, if you follow the empires, Spanish Empire, even the Germanic Empire, Latin, and French Empire, they all have a common thing, and that it's their language. It's a meaningful one. I'd be curious to know what Mandarin or the spoken language during the dynasties were. think about Greek, for example. Greek language, the way it's spoken, it's a comprehension language. And what a lot of people we call of Greece at the time, a lot of them were philosophizing. Philosophy, a lot has to do with comprehension. No sense of philosophizing about life with just your emotions. That's not really going to get you in a progression of trying to make sense of how two elements work together. So Sanskrit, that resonates with me, why it's a healing language, because it was supposedly handed down by, let's say, the gods, because when they came down into mortal forms, the mortal form had a limitation to it. So by having a spoken language such as Sanskrit, and something close to it might have been Baroque music, it could soothe the soul, but it wasn't a healing language. So if you're an immortal coming into a mortal form, how do you make sure that the vessel lasts longer before you have to leave it? So they weren't really worrying about them dying. They don't die, but they come down into a mortal form for a short period of time. So let's say the Dalai Lama is an immortal being. How are we going to truly understand him if we don't understand that we are? Then people put words like they're gods, and it sounds nice when somebody says I'm a god, but do they really explain to themselves what part of them is a god and what purpose would it serve? A lot of times when people say it, they say it with their ego. I'm a god, look at me, I'm important. Okay, but to who? So again, because I'm using an English language, it's a meaning. So it's like, look at me, I'm important. That's meaning, opposed to, am I important if you were using Greek? So. Good morning, Luis.
And here's another wonderful book that I acquired at the thrift shop for only $1.40. How to Know God by Deepak Chopra. Wow. Can you imagine how to know God? How that would be?
It might have been a pun on himself. Maybe he was trying to tell people how to know the self, how to know God, if a person thinks that they're God or a God.
This is the most important book of our time.
It could be.
About God for our times. The book is a magical stairway to ascend to a life-changing experience of the sacred. That's what Robert Thurman, a professor of religion from Columbia University, said.
I think, Jay, what happens sometimes, people have good intentions when they set out on their journey, and then they want to share, and humans either will resist or worship more the physical form that we're in, because that's how most people get caught up in the material, opposed to everybody's just a messenger to each other and we can share, but unfortunately most people end up settling and say, okay, I'll just take the accolades. Why? Because they're not really going to understand the message for themselves. This way, how important do you think reading was to a baby? It wasn't designed for us to come out of the womb and all of a sudden be able to read all the different books, so I guess it's one of those things that makes you stop and philosophize, what was my intention? And sometimes you can deduce all the things that we do have, not to denounce written works, but that's like saying that I'm going to praise the calculator more than my own ability to use numbers, and not to say I created numbers, but if I get to use it, but now I put it into a device such as a calculator, that's no different putting it in a book. We spend too much emphasis thinking that everything's important is out of a book or out of a person's mouth as an oracle teacher, opposed to they're just echo chambers. You're hearing somebody else, everything that's written or spoken is afterthoughts, literally afterthoughts. You know, can you do mantras and go, you know, what's the word to use? Is it beyond the mind? But then that still doesn't really talk about the word. So, but hey, like I said, for people, if they bring, if that brings value to them, to have a book, no different. Some people, when they do chanting, whether it's a Buddhism or the Christians, when they do rosaries, they need to, you know, have these beads. And of course, it's interesting that both of them have 108 beads, number 9. But then there's also the number 1, 0, and 8 in there. So again, we use a car, but we don't understand how it came to be. We read books, we collect books, we burn books, but we never really understand what was the message for me in all of those things. You know, then we end up doing things like, you just said it. You just said it for the sake of saying it, Jay, the Dalai Lama, or somebody says, I'm a doctor. We get caught up on labels opposed to how important is saying he's the Dalai Lama, opposed to let's stop talking about who his name is and let's talk about maybe what the message brings to us. But that's going to be something that's always there. It's like when people watch sports, they're not really worrying about whether or not they understand how the sport came to be. They just want to know who's going to win. You know, what's the outcome? Is it going to favor, if it's going to favor my likes or my dislikes? So I'm going to resist my pain, but damn, I'm going to be attached to all my pleasures. You know, I heard the other day there, the opposite of love is not hate, but attachments. And as soon as I heard that, I thought, that resonates from my own personal experience. It's not like, oh, I wonder what those people think of those things. Yeah, that makes sense why those people are always confused. No, it's for me. That message was for me. I'm the only one that's going to benefit from it. Now, if it benefits for you, then you could do what I do. I can share. But when people argue or debate with each other, then the question I have is for myself, if they've come across to my kingdom, who's protecting their kingdom? The vessel. You know, this is why people walk around their chessboard with their own kingdom and they move around and then they want to take somebody else's piece out. I said, that's not your role to take out my piece. So, you know, really, this is why I've kind of said it like tongue in cheek. We should burn all the books. We should burn all the calculators, because this way people can't hide behind, but I'll read that book later on. I won't spend time really working with my mind and my emotions. I'll just do a calculator. Look, the calculator said that's the answer. Well, where's your answer? So again, Jay, we have people that come back and they choose to be a monk because they know there's a lot of distractions. And the distraction, it always within oneself. I could say from my own personal experience, it's got to look all the stuff I have behind me. Even the device I have on me, you know, I'm having an aid, you know, opposed to, do I really need to listen out of headphones? Can I just listen into nature or into the air? You know, I get it. A lot of things, not a lot of things, well, some things, I can't say a lot of things, that's too generalizing. Some things do bring value. It's like a vaccine. It can bring value, but applied to the wrong person, it could be very destructive or neutral. It's like I've always used it myself. I've heard myself here. I hear myself where you can practice with a bow and arrow and hitting the bullseye, and then you perfect it. But who's to say that was the right target to hit? You would have been better off just throwing the arrow in the dark. That would be better progression for me. And sometimes a lot of information that I get or the things I do blindly. You know, that's the mind that thinks, well, I have an order. Actually, can't even say it's the mind. It's the conditioning of the mind, thinking, okay, this is the way it is. It's like telling a child that you can't cry. Boys don't cry. Why would you tell somebody else not to use one of their fingers? and then tell another child, because it's a girl, that they can use their fingers. This is how we stunt each other. You know, if in the old days, if Jay, maybe not even the old days, in current cultures today, they would say, why are you living everything through a TV? Why are you living everything through a book? Why aren't you out there experiencing it for yourself? For some people, it's advantageous to read a books. There's reasons why maybe you have so many books and that's important to you. I can say for myself, I started getting books, but then something told me inside, Dom, you're going to fall asleep. Why? Because you're not meant to read books. You know, other people are meant to read books. So it goes back to everybody has their own gifts. You know, some people know how to play music at a very young age. Now, some people, humans could turn around and we can rationalize it. Yeah, but his father was a pianist, so he must have got it from him. I said, yeah, that also validates you can inherit energy from future generations or past generations. You know, but that still doesn't explain that you can't force a child to learn how to play piano. You know, or you get a child that naturally knows how to run better than the average person or a person. But even that's comparison. You know, again, that favors things like the biggest distractions. Well, not one of the, it's one of the distraction is the Olympics. The Olympics encourages competing with others opposed to getting to know oneself. A person that enjoys fishing would say, why would I want to compete with other people? This is not a competition. But for a lot of people, that's conditioning. That's why when we go to school, educate and schooling are two different things. In schooling, it teaches people to be indoctrinated with the concept that you got an A, you weren't good enough, the other person had an A plus. Well, who created all these things? You know, like, why don't we live in a world where everybody, humans create the same car? Would make sense if you look economically. If everybody had the same cars, then we would have all the same parts, and that's one less thing to worry. Yeah, but I want to identify myself as different. Why would you need a car? You already got a vessel to be in. You know, again, these are things. Hi, Mike.
Hi, Mike. Mike, today I learned from Dom, the destructor of mankind, DOM. I learned the philosophy that says love is, no, the opposite of love is attachments. Wow. That is so interesting.
Well, if a person goes inwards and then says to himself, can I be attached to hate? You know, there's people, their parents die and they still are angry at them. So they're attached. No different people that actually say, well, you got to love. It's a form of an attachment, you know, opposed to being the observer. Those things, I'm not saying I practice it, but these two shall pass. Literally, they'll pass. So when you see somebody being kind to somebody, no, take it for what it is. If you find yourself wanting to hang on to it, then when somebody else is being mean to you, there's a good chance you're going to be consistent. Then eventually you have to say, does it bring me value in each different moments? Sometimes it will. That's why we have different emotions. You know, some people choose to be attached to one more than the other. Hence, when you hear somebody jonesing, I want to be happy all the time. That's a person telling them, go ahead, sorry, Mike.
Jairo, you ought to be quite familiar with this idea of attachment. I think it's probably one of the basic building blocks of Buddhism.
I am attached to this book, Programming the Human Biocomputer.
Oh, we have even that, Mike. We have the concept of attachments to groups. So it's not necessarily a Buddhism teaching. It's a human, experience. So, but then we have to categorize things. Okay, Buddhists do it this way, Hindus do it this way, Muslims do it this way. Muslims have to be submissive, Christians have to be prayers, opposed to, it's just a human experience. or it could even be the mind experience. We all are attached to certain things. And then once you become attached to a certain thing more than others, then it goes from dependency to addictions. But people quickly say, well, it's an addiction. No, it's a dependency. Food's a dependency. But if you start giving up all the other dependency for it, then you can start classifying it as an addiction. But then a person says, yeah, but what about alcohol? I said, no, what's the one? Besides breathing, what's the next major staple? Probably food. Maybe even rest would be ahead of that, and sleep. But again, those are all conditionings. Go ahead, Mike.
It seems to me from my observations that it is possible for people to get addicted to anger, that they can get a high from it.
Well, Mike, and the thing is, for some people, it's not on the passenger side. It's on the driver's side. That's where most people are attached. What people resist, that means there must be a really big attachment somewhere in there. Because people usually try to resist things like pain, but that's not their real thing that's driving them. What's driving them is their attachments to their comforts or pleasures. How many people will volunteer?
I have a book on anger. But I am angry that I cannot find it. It's somewhere. Brought it over.
Well, if you keep looking around and not finding it, you may find that that is deeply satisfying.
But I got this book the other day. Destructive Emotions. But it's a translation of the book Destructive Emotions into Spanish. So I have to read it in Spanish and then think about it in English. But anger must be in there somewhere.
Well, once again, if a person's trying to resist it, they'll do everything in their mind, opposed to if you look for it hard enough, then you'll go from being angry to being frustrated. So at least you've kind of toppled it a little bit. But really, that's not usually what most people's attachments are. Their attachment is just to things such as, I want comfort. I want my life to be at peace. Okay, then be silent with yourself.
What I have observed is that there is this attachment amongst almost everyone to what you might call stories, beliefs, scripts, maps of reality, often to the point where they are willing to, in some sense, destroy their lives rather than giving up their attachment to how they think things are.
Oh, so are you saying that we get stories programmed into our biocomputer, and then we attempt to apply the stories to real life situations, and then they don't quite fit into real life, so we get angry at the story. We find the story.
No, we don't get angry at the story.
Oh.
We get angry at real life.
Oh, yes. That's what I meant. No, I didn't mean that. That's better. That's an improvement in my thesis. So we get angry at real life because it doesn't match our story, because we're attached to the story. This is my story, and I'm going to stick to it.
And what the attachment? What is your
real
story? Life?
Then something is wrong with real life. It is threatening me. So to whatever threatens me, I must apply anger. I must get angry at it. Then it'll go away. I'll get angry.
The human experience, Jay, is the story is one part of it, but the story itself by itself is not your attachment. It's you're defending and attacking it. People will have arguments with each other because they don't realize their way is this. If you choose to be the middle way, the observing way, realize those aren't mine to own. So a story could be anything, but it's your defending of it, hence dogmas, and you're attacking. But again, that's just more on an energetic level because we're just using words.
Yes.
So if you didn't know the language that a person was telling you the story, you wouldn't have nothing to defend or attack. You would be more like in curiosity, like, oh, I wonder what he's trying to say to me. So then really it's not the story. It's what we bring to the table. The story is an external thing. Now, you're defending and attacking, because I have this conversation. I already know when a person's getting into a defense and attack because they've already revealed with themselves, because I know that about myself, where I'm very biased in certain situations. So now, what am I trying to favor and what am I trying to exclude? Opposed to just put your damn hand on the stove and experience emotions and how to actually articulate it. Then that'll be your reward. But most people say, but I don't want to do that. I said, so where did you initially get that story that you're manifesting over and over again and not sitting long enough out and realize, but I don't own it? Because if you did, then you'd have to explain, then where did the language come from? Once you start doing that critical deduction, some people don't want to because they figure, well, but that's endless. I said, so where did you get that program thinking that there should be an answer? It's like when I hear people talking and they say, at the end of the day, I make it a point. I said, what, the day comes to an end? Because they don't realize they're in this reactive speech. They've forgotten to have the ability to respond to their own words. Or when I hear somebody that's an atheist or a Christian, and then they use the word damn God, I said, if you don't value the concept of a God, why would that word even come out of your mouth? Now, they might say, well, Dominic, it's just a word I say. I said, okay, so saying the N word or saying the W word, like WAP, that means what? It's like when we say stories and then you start thinking, what does it really mean with water off a duck's back? Especially when I'm the kind of person that said, I always keep it in a human context. I don't think I'm an animal. So don't give me this rabbit down a rabbit hole, or don't go around saying governments. It's humans. Don't tell me about science. It's humans. I don't want to hear about a person that's a mathematician. He's human. And I'm just using that as an example, Mike. So now when somebody says to me, well, then what should we do? Call them by the energy that they're familiar with. Their name is Mike. Their name is Dominic, Domenico, or Jaro, because that's the person that's been with them the whole time. I'm not a science. I'm not a religious. I'm not those things. But most people value the concept because they hear it and they don't question it. What is the concept? I am blah, blah, blah. Or I am not this.
I know what you are. You are a word.
I'm using words. Yes.
Empires of the word. A language, history of the world. In this book, you will learn what you are. You are a word. And the word is Dominic. And you identify with that word. And that's your story. And you create a self. And then you defend it. And you get angry with others that attack it.
When Dominic said I was a human, speaking of words and labels, it was interesting. I immediately had a feeling I ought to deny that.
Valid point. Yes, because that's another I am this and that, but that's I do it. So I'm always included in the fun. Like when Jaro was just talking about, I am the word. I don't see words. I probably pick up more the energy and frequency from it. It's like when I look at my cat, I know when I'm saying Buffy, that's more to please me. She might hear poof, poof, poof. And if I repeat it over and over again, then she might respond to the energy that comes from it or the sound that comes from it. I don't know. But if I did,
I hear, yeah. Yeah, I hear cats can learn to recognize their names and they can respond to that. Although my impression is dogs are probably a bit better than that. They're more, something in their construction is more socially oriented, so far as I
especially
can tell.
especially Pavlov's dog, for it is written in Pavlovian programming. This may
Yeah.
be the source of anger, because I have a hypothesis.
Now, one of the things that I have noticed again and again about these stories is the defensiveness people often have about personal stories. For example, they will have a story that COVID vaccines are filled with these little microcapsules, which are going to do terrible things to your body. And they'll get very defensive if you deny them a story like that. Or they will, much worse, they'll say, no, I'm not a human, I'm a mathematician.
Mhm.
The thing is, it has the feeling to me that it's as though they are in a low energy state. If I switch metaphors and start thinking physics for a moment, it's as though they're in a low energy state and they have difficulty summoning the energy to break out. Because one of the things I have certainly noticed is when I have an opinion or a prejudice about something or someone, and something that comes up to conflict with that, it is often a distinct effort to force myself to look at that assertion and come to a decision as to what the evidence is, supporting or denying it.
No.
Well, there's a lot of professions. It only teaches people to be very reactive. My professions, such as using numbers, for example, whether it's an accountant or whatever, it kind of forces you or conditions you to double or triple check your work. So the person that has this, I don't know, for some reason, I think the vaccine shots could be harmful. There's a layer of truth in all that, meaning that vaccines aren't designed like taking Prozac for everybody. So the pharmaceutical is at a disadvantage. The fact that whether or not it's malicious or not, let's say it's very consideration and trying to help humanity. How do you give something to everybody that clearly shows that we're all different? If we have a make of car, then we can say, okay, all the parts will fit in that make of car for all the millions that we did. But if we have different makes of cars, we can't use the same parts for it. Even fuel shows that. So when somebody's a non-vaxxer or vaxxer, first of all, that's labeling of humans again, like calling somebody an immigrant, opposed to no, they're if we're going to use common language, let's go with maybe a human. Well, we don't, because we even have different languages. So when somebody does a vaccine shot, for example, but they don't understand their body, then they're going to say, well, then, my doctor just told me to fast before I go do the operation. Nah, that's all crap. And then they just do it. And then they wonder why there's an operation that doesn't become successful. Not everybody builds their immune system externally. In a way we do, but sometimes it's internally. So now when somebody brings cold weather, then hot weather, we're building our immune system. But when somebody says, okay, but what about taking an injection of something? For some people, it will help. For other people, it might as well just be a placebo. For other people, it can actually go backwards now. Now you become the carrier of it. It doesn't do you enough damage, but it'll do other people damage. Just like when people think a flu comes miraculously because I touched something. No, something has already come into the system, and now that's just a butterfly effect. But when people do things such as taking a flu shot, there's mercury in that injection. And for some people, it could be very harmful to them. For other people, it just sits there. Mercury's not like where you fast and all of a sudden 10 days later you start burning muscles or you start burning fat. No, Mercury, you got to go 30 days before that stuff starts removing from your body. But if it's one of those things where it's harmful to you opposed to it just sits there, you're going to have to wait, you know, like, and it's like different kinds of liquids inside the car. Some of them, like gas, you might have to flush it. You can't be just putting more stuff in it. This is why when people usually take the flu shot, not all people, they get a cold. So the virus would be no different. Now, just to change it a little bit, this isn't about health with this. It's like the flu shot. Most people will go to work for economic reasons. And whoever's doing all of this, whether they're doing it malicious or not, is taking that into account. Because if they really were genuinely worrying about this like Ebola or whatever kind of stuff, they already know from their previous history, the only way we ever get foods in other countries or medicine to other people is through military. So something else is going on here, because you can't force me to take something when a person says, but they're my rights. Okay, yeah, you're your own sovereign being, but are you going to go on that train? Well, yeah, your rights is outside of that. Or same with plane. This is why when people say, well, I don't want to take a vaccine shot and I don't want to wear a mask. Okay, fine. Turn the channel. What do you mean? Don't go in that grocery store then. This is where I try so gently to play both sides for myself. I know if I do the vaccine or if I don't do the vaccine, there has to be reasons why I choose to do it. But for a lot of people, Mike, that's it. From now on, you and Jay, we're going to convert everybody to be Muslims. I don't give a damn about your religion. You're going to become Muslim. How many people are going to resist that? But if we turn around and say we're all going to make one economy, and if you don't want to trade or buy, then you're going to convert. This is where people know something else is going on, but most people have been asleep most of their life by realizing, well, we already have passports. This is just a different version of it now. We already are doing things collectively by exchanging money. Now, they play the game by giving different denominations, like they do with religion. You know, some of the common language is numbers, colors. You know, I can go around the world and I can point to something, and I know as I'm talking to that person, I'm saying the color black, and that person is pointing to the same object and saying, I don't understand his language, but I understand what he's pointing at, and they'll use their language to describe it, hence telepathic. But we're not realizing, is it really telepathic? What people think of telepathic, they think they could read somebody else's mind. The only way you can do that is if you read your own mind.
So, Dom, you've brought up wonderful thoughts in my mind, like the humans that have a tendency to be suspicious of the vaccine. These humans are, for various reasons, are looked at upon as a threat to getting everyone vaccinated. But then you also point out that vaccines are a one-size-fits-all. So what we need is demonopolize the vaccines and have them become open source so that all companies can get on the vaccine bandwagon and create their own flavors of vaccine and package them and put them on Walmart shelves. And then you could get your own what attracts you, and they put them in packages like to get little kids vaccinated. You package them with cartoon characters and things like that, and yeah, and maybe design what is it called? Yeah, you know.
Hey, can I share something? There's something that's been done in the last 20 years. They've done the European Union. That was a test plate. To make the European Union become one again, they purposely did, because they knew what you really need to do first to have a one world, you have to have a one government in Europe. They knew that wasn't going to work without actually bringing out military to enforce it on their civilians. And of course, military are the civilians. So what they did the inter-traveling with each other. Then they did a big leap that they knew it was going to go backwards, but they did it in nevertheless. They'll just say, listen, we'll take England out of it. We'll do the one currency thing. Once again, the only way that was ever going to work is the first government. So now the vaccine is just one part of it. Let's get the pandemic, means all people in Greek. Let's do something first. That's going to be the disguise, because eventually, how many people are going to struggle when they decide we're going to have one currency? People are going to say, but I have so much of my own currency. What are you going to do with it? Like they did the European currency. We're going to devalue it. People are going to be suspicious because some of it's going to come to fruition where people don't like change, whether it's positive or negative. And then they're going to say, listen, we don't want to do all the different denomination of currency. And while we're there, we're not going to do all the denominations of religions. Even science, they have all the different denominations. Eventually, they're going to have what they call the New World Order, flip it around, boom. And you're going to like it. Why? Because most people already don't realize unintentionally when you're always giving the energy to what you say the word positive, you're giving it to called masculine, which is the karma energy, not the illusion. The illusion is in the feminine side, the language we use. So now I shared earlier, you weren't here, Mike, all the empires were based on a meaningful language, English, French, Spanish, and Germanic. Right now it's the Germanic. Greek is a comprehension language. That's more or less for philosophy. That's why people used to use, they would philosophize about how things work.
That's why we should learn Greek.
You can
and obtain anorexia or something.
Again, we're using words to describe things, and to an African, they're going to say anorexia, and fuck that shit. We go, anorexia. And that makes sense. Again, it all depends on your energy you're in. This whole ideal of thinking that a religion is going to work, but we've never addressed all the different languages we have in the world. We've never worked collectively. Something or us are purposely leaving us in this order realm to still play chaotic. So either the physical order, and then in our thoughts, our emotions are still in a chaotic energy. So until we realize that, people are going to say, yeah, but I do care about my health. Taking the vaccine is a very selfish act. No different working all your life for the sole purpose of earning money. It's a selfish act. A guy that decides that I'm going to live off the grid and be a farmer is a very selfish act. Is it rationally selfish? No, it's a very selfish act. Now, whether or not a person wants to perceive that selfish act as bad or good, that's another conversation. But it is a selfish act. It's all about me, opposed to, are you going to be rationally about it? Oh, I do consider other people. It's very self-absorbed. And so they spin it on people by saying, well, you're being very selfish if you're not taking the vaccine. I said, you're being very selfish if you're actually not studying what's in it or what isn't. You got to play the game of what is a virus, what isn't. Because germ theory, a long time ago, denounced what people think that it's contagious. Because they've done the experiment where they've taken somebody that's literally sick and then tried to give it to somebody else that isn't, and it didn't take. So now we have to do more investigation. Is that based on their blood type? Is that based on their environment? Because not all case works. And unfortunately, for a lot of people, if we're really going to get to the nuts and bolts, this is not about health. This is about commerce. I live here in Canada where the truckers don't have a clue what they're getting themselves into, because the big trucking companies, they're not touching this. Walmart has their own truckers. These truckers are complaining. What?
Luis is back. And Dominic left. Or he left his feet.
Cat wanted out. My cat wanted out.
And he's back.
Morning, everybody.
We were
about me.
You've been reincarnated.
We were talking about programming the human biocomputer and the Pavlov's dog and Mike's cat, and whether the dog is better at learning his own name than the cat.
I thought you were talking about knowing God, how to know God.
And how to know God. And then
the real question is, How
and
to
L. Ron
be God.
Hubbard's Scientology and the problem of work.
Oh dear.
And then destructive emotions in translated to Spanish, and anger. And I have the solution to anger. I can tie it all together. So Pavlov's dog is an example of how we can program the biocomputer. And we do that by showing the dog meat, and the dog salivates. And so the showing the meat is a input, and then we associate it with the ringing of the bell, and then we do that many times until the dog gets programmed to knowing when the bell rings there's also going to be meat. And so, but then we remove the meat and just do the bell ringing, and
Who's
then
wh-
the dog salivates.
Jairo? You have to welcome. We have another person here.
Oh,
Who's
welcome, Neo.
Neo
And then what
Tanafranca?
happens is that the dog gets really upset and mad at the dog's owner because he doesn't show the meat and only rings the bell. So can you imagine what a hard time Pavlov's dog had when ringing the bell and all he gets is salivation. So the dog
Jairo,
died angry.
Jairo,
Yes.
the bell has quit ringing.
Thank you, Mike.
You can hold off for a second.
So that's my thesis of what causes anger.
Jairo, who is Neo?
Who is
Who
what?
is Neo? Neo.
Neo. Oh, he was in the Matrix movie. And
Now I understand.
so from the Dalai Lama was talking about anger, and then somebody asked a question: could there be virtuous anger? Like in Buddhism, anger is like the biggest cardinal sin. But then someone asked